ESPN has been hypocritical. They should hold anchors to a fair and consistent standard. ESPN suspended a longtime anchor, Linda Cohn, not too long ago for expressing a political viewpoint.
Do you still stand by your statement of the other day when you said that what Jemele Hill did was a fireable offense?
I do.
Well, that was White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders doubling down on calls for ESPN to fire anchor Jemele Hill after she called President Trump a white supremacist on Twitter this week. ESPN President John Skipper sent a company-wide email to staffers yesterday alluding to the controversy, saying this: ESPN is not a political organization where sports and politics intersect. No one is told what view they must express. Well, the memo came the same day President Trump demanded an apology from the sports network, saying ESPN is paying a really big price for its politics and bad programming. People are dumping it in record numbers. Apologize for untruth. Joining me now is Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com and also MSNBC political contributor, and Brittany Cooper, contributing writer at Salon. And Brittany, right when I was reading that, not only were you shaking your head, you rolled right into this chuckle that you still have now. Why is that?
Because the only person who owes an apology here is Donald Trump for his range of offensive views and the levels of discomfort and terror that he has used his position in the White House to do to harm our Muslim citizens, our Mexican citizens, and certainly any citizen of color in this country.
So would you go far to say you're just calling hypocrisy here on
It's absolute hypocrisy. Why is anyone mad at Jemele Hill? She spoke the truth. And what we need, if it's true that ESPN is a journalistic outlet, then journalists are supposed to help us get to the truth.
All right, but when it comes to that, we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to bring up the initial tweet that started this all, and Jason, and we'll talk about that. So this is what she said. She said, Donald Trump is a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists. Trump is the most ignorant, offensive president of my lifetime. His rise is a direct result of white supremacy, period. So you heard from the White House that Jemele Hill comments were a fireable offense. Do you agree?
No, they're not. And I got to be honest, like, I teach at the School of Global Journalism of Politics at Morgan State University. We talk to our students all the time about journalistic integrity. We talk to them about honesty, and we talk to them about provability. Everything that Jemele Hill said, except for the fact that she thinks he's the worst president, these are all things that can be proven. These are all things that are actually up for discussion and debate. None of this would be happening if it weren't for the fact that she was a woman, that she's African American, that she's speaking from a sports outlet. But the conversations that she's having and telling the world that Donald Trump is a white supremacist, that's something we talk about all the time, because it's true.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up. Do you think it would have been any different, Brittany, if she did not work for a sports network, that people want to go and they want to see their headlines and their scores and highlights, and they don't, maybe that's the reason why they're not watching cable news, because they don't want the politics into it. Do you think that would have made it any different?
So there are two problems here. The first problem is that sports has never been apolitical, and in this moment, we're seeing sports teams taking sides. So this is Colin Kaepernick. This is the Miami Heat from a few years ago. This is even at the college level with the University of Missouri football team in 2015 forcing the president out by refusing to play. So we're in a moment where sports is deeply political, and ESPN should be driving that conversation rather than feeling like it's keeping it from doing its job. But look, I think the sort of other point here is that, of course, like, my problem is that why is the White House using its power to say that journalists and private citizens can't disagree with the president? That's really dangerous. It's not something that we should accept. I mean, it's clear violations of the First Amendment here.
You got the freedom of expression here.
I mean, but it's an attempt to, so it's also part of a larger attack that this White House has had on black women. So this didn't begin with Jemele Hill. This is also how they treated April Ryan earlier this year. This is the treatment of their administration of Maxine Waters. Black women have been on the forefront of saying, there's a problem with this administration. We're going to hold it with the level of integrity. And because of that, they have really been the biggest victims of its push to repress any sort of dissent.
Well, it's also interesting how ESPN has gone about this as well, especially with that statement. I think that's when you were shaking your head. Jason, I want to bring you into this. Jemele said that her views expressed were her personal beliefs and that she regrets painting ESPN in an unfair light. They've accepted her apology. At this point, why is it important for ESPN to stand up for her? Is it because of exactly what we're talking about right now, that they might be, you know, a bullseye of a target if they don't?
Yeah, look, ESPN is a business, and as a business, they have to be concerned, but you also have to protect your employees. I actually thought that what Jemele Hill said was what ESPN should have said from the beginning. They should have said, hey, look, this is her personal opinion. We have to remember, this was something that Jemele Hill said on her Twitter handle that she had before she came to ESPN. If she said that in the middle of a Michigan-Ohio State game, I hate Donald Trump and he think he's a white supremacist, then we might say, what does this have to do with Ohio State? But she didn't. She was talking about it in the context of something that she was saying on Twitter. So that's what we have to remember.
And let's bring in ESPN's statement here when it comes to that and further this discussion. You have the President, John Skipper, saying this. We have issues of significant debate in our country at this time. Given this reality, we have social media policies which require people to understand that social platforms are public and their comment of them will reflect ESPN. At a minimum, comments should not be inflammatory or personal. We had a violation of these standards in recent days, and our handling of this is in a private matter. Go, Brittany. I see you
This is
wanting
the
to go.
problem. Why is calling out racism at the level of the presidency the inflammatory thing? Our president inflames everyone. He incites everyone. That is his MO. And at some point, look, we're not going to solve the problems of racism in this country if no one can say the truth, because there becomes this sort of liberal belly aching, right, that says we're offending the president. We're not respecting standards of civility. Our president is uncivil, as a matter of course.
Jason's chopping at the bit. I got to get in here.
And here's the thing, and I also have to say this. A lot of this also has to do with ESPN, and I think a lot of businesses right now misinterpreting sports fandom. Look, not only did Hillary Clinton actually win the majority of the vote, but remember, Donald Sterling lost his team 2 years ago just for saying something racist. It didn't hurt basketball at all. I think this has to do with people stereotyping the kind of people who watch football, the kind of people who watch baseball. This country is much more diverse in its sports appreciation than I think some of these networks are aware of. The fact of the matter is Colin Kaepernick had the highest selling jersey in the NFL last year. There are lots of people who agree with what Jemele Hill said, and I think that should also be appreciated as opposed to immediately assuming that insulting President Trump or telling the truth about him that you're going to lose ratings.
But quickly to both of you, do you think because, there's a social media part of it here too, that kind of there's that straddling fine line? If you said that on the air again while you're calling your shots or calling scores, but yet in a tweet, it's a little bit more, I could say, oh, I have the best ice cream in the world at this place, but then I could say something when it comes to my personal preference about somebody else that could be totally, very quickly.
Yeah, look, we have a president who governs by Twitter. So it's absolutely appropriate for us to, if the public space has moved to Twitter, then this is the place that we need to have these debates.
Jason, last word.
They promoted Michael and Jemele to the 6 to say exactly what she said on Twitter. It's going to be great for ratings, and they should relax and defend their employees.
Great conversation. I know people are still having it at home with themselves or maybe the person next to them. MSNBC contributor Jason Johnson and Salon's Brittany Cooper, to both of you. Great conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.
And we'll